This video is going to cover a do-it-yourself T-track based roof rack for a first generation Toyota Sequoia. Here I've got the model of what this is going to look like. The first thing I want you to notice is this section right here is the factory rails. So that's the length of the internal dimensions of the factory rails. The goal of this project is to be able to, in a very less expensive manner, create a quality rack system that's going to fit right into the factory rails. So I took some measurements, and this long bar right here represents the internal dimensions of the factory rails. That's the space that we would have to work with. I guess really it represents the factory rails itself. I'll show you in a moment. Now this area goes to the front of the vehicle. Here, if I were to extend the rail forward, would be in the way of the sunroof, and I didn't want to have that be an option. I figured that if I could extend it back to where it would be about 1 inch of clearance, when I lifted up the back gate, I gained about 14 inches of space where I can put things on the top. So I just want to show you kind of what I have going on here. So this is what the factory rails look like on the inside. And there's actually another kind of portion over here, but I'm not going to mount anything there, so I just modeled up this portion. So what I'm doing here is I'm using 1x2. Let me back out to show what this looks like better. I'm using 1x2 extruded aluminum. I took out my factory crossbars, and they measured about 42 1/8. So I had everything cut to 42 1/8. But the basis of all of this is some extruded aluminum that I found that would fit right in to this without any modifications. And the only thing that I had to do was to find a way to fill in this gap where the T-track in here could mount tightly to the extruded aluminum out here. So I will show you how I did that. This is the track that I'm talking about. This is the part that's going to slide right through the factory rails and will give me mounting points where you can use standard T-track hardware. One of the things that I found was that regular T-track hardware would not fit through that. It would just slide right through that gap. So I needed to find some way to use either bigger hardware or fill the gap. And this is the stuff that I use. This is also a little bit less expensive, which is great. And you don't have to get the black, you can get it unanodized. And it'll be a little bit cheaper. So here I have the factory rails that I took off. I added some flat black primer and paint to it. And one thing that I need to mention is that these rails are not straight. Hopefully you can see in the video here that this is actually curved to match the profile of the top of the roof. So if you're going to do something in this manner, I know there's other people who have done this. There's one company that sells some flat ruggedized cross rails that'll fit in the factory rails. You're not going to have a nice flat surface to work from up there. Here's that section I was talking about, this void in here, and this T-slot slides right in and fills in that gap. Now, because of the curve in this, you're not going to be able to put a whole section of this, so it will have to be cut up into small sections, and I'll show you how I mounted my crossbars to this. So this is the part that makes this whole system really work. This is a 1032 square nut. Now most of the hardware that you're going to use for this project is going to be 1/4 hardware. This is 3/8 of an inch square, and it's 1/8 wide, thick, I guess I should say. It's the perfect size to go right into this slot. It's got enough room that it can slide freely, and it's just a little bit thicker than this, so it can move back and forth. So here's what this is going to look like. This end bracket I found from research is the second strongest way to butt these two together and to get the minimum deflection. There was a study done on that. The other one is anchor points, but you require additional machining. This is going to work great. But again, you need to have these spacers in here. So we're going to take this T-track and we're going to slide it in like this. And then you need to drill some holes on the back for the Allen screws so you can tighten that down. And I will show you what that looks like because I have one that's completed. So here's one that's completed. Hopefully you can see the nuts in there, and that's pretty sturdy. You can see the holes where I drilled to access the Allen heads on those screws so I can tighten them down. Here is my factory rail. And it slides right in with just enough wiggle room that it is going to be movable. So then the question is, well, how are you going to make this so that it's not going to move around while you're driving? And here's the answer. Now you'll notice that this is 1 inch wider than it needs to be on each side. And so I've just got one of these T-nuts, and as you rotate this, it tightens down. Put one on either side, and then that will clamp down on the factory rails and hold this in place. Now for the very first rail towards the front, I got this half round to kind of provide a little bit of less drag as I'm driving down the road. I did make this a little bit longer than I probably should have, so it's not going to be right up against the front. It will have a little bit of gap, and maybe I can even put a screw on there, but it will be held in place by that plug that goes in the front. But I'll have a nut on the back here that I can crank down, and then it won't be going anywhere. So now that you've seen how this really works, I'm going to go back to the model here. And one of the key things that I wanted to do was to try to extend this a little bit. I could get about 6 rails if I did about a 10-inch spacing. It's about 60 inches from the back to the front. But I wanted a little bit more than that. So here I have a 1x1 rail that's going to attach here to this 1x2 and also to the extrusion that's inside of the factory rails. And it's going to go backward and give me about another 18 inches. 14 inches, I should say, from here to here. And give me a little more space on the rail. I got some rubber bumpers to put on the bottom just in case that there's a kind of a wide gap there so that it doesn't move too much with the weight. But hopefully this is going to be strong since it's going to be attached at the sides, and also this will be attached to that. One of the things I'm hoping to accomplish with this build is, before with the factory crossbars, I didn't really set anything on top of them. I just kind of set things between them and then tied it down to the roof and also to the crossbar so it wouldn't slide back and forth. And sometimes that would cause some deformation in the top of the rails, and it would cause you could tell that it would change the seal on the sunroof, and that's not something that I wanted to happen. And that's kind of where this concept is coming from. And you can see if I went and modeled my roof bags. I'll unhide those. I should be able to carry both of them now. So I can carry more things on the top, and it's going to be a lot more sturdy. So the total cost on this so far has been, it was just over $300 shipping for the T-slots and the hardware. I got them from tnuts.com. They did all the cuts precisely for me. Some things I got a little extra long because I wasn't sure what size I really needed it to be. But yeah, for about $300, I'm going to get a lot more functionality, and I'm not going to be paying the $1,300 that of other models. Now, again, this is not going to be completely flat, but hopefully it's going to be flat enough that it's going to work pretty well. So here I have the extension that's going to slide into the back, and how this is going to work is I've got these end connectors are going to connect in here. I've got the holes drilled for the access holes. This will be the same mounting method as was used to mount this to this rail piece here. That'll be mounted here and here the same way. But on the front here, I have this that I'm going to slide in here. So this will be tied together. Then these will be tied together to this. These will be tied here. Hopefully that's going to be strong enough that there's not a lot of deflection up and down in the back. If there is, might have to change this out for a 1x2 or something if there's enough room, but we'll have to see. Now I want to show some of the photos from the completed build. First, here we have the rear driver's side portion showing the rack extension. I put a cap on the back corners to try to keep water out of that area, and also to cover the exposed bare aluminum from the cut that I did on that piece. I added some rubber bumper material that fits down in the tracks. I thought that maybe the wind would pop that cap off of there because it's just held in place with a press fit plastic pin, and so far that's been holding up pretty good. This side of the rack was a little bit more wobbly. I think I attribute that to changing to a different size of Allen screw, and I think when I made that change, I either made it a little less tight or maybe a little bit tight on the other side, but there's a difference there. It's kind of significant, but not enough that I needed to put a rubber bumper underneath that part of the rail to keep it from, sagging enough that it's going to hit the top of the roof. This photo is looking from the rear toward the front of the rack. You can see on the left side of the screen where the extension meets what would be the last rail of the extension if the extension was not added. You can identify where the extension is by the extra, in this view it would be a vertical rail, and the shorter kind of crossbars that are attached to it. Now we're looking a little to the right where the rear extension meets the rest of the rack. And in this photo you can see the nuts that are holding the rack cross rails tightly to the factory rails. Now we're zoomed back a little bit. We're looking at the front of the rack here. Here you can see that the rack starts just past the sunroof. Now we're looking a little bit more towards the rear of the vehicle, getting a better look at the rack extension. And here's a look at the completed rack from more of a distance. It looks really nice, and the new flat black paint on the factory rails perfectly matches the new rack. This photo was taken just before our last camping trip of the season. With a large family, it's hard to find space for all the tents, pads, sleeping bags. With the new rack and its rear extension, we were able to put all of this on the rack in 2 roof bags, which would not have been possible before. And it was a lot easier to use both the new rack's crossbars and the factory rails to get the bags mounted more securely without deforming the roof. So in conclusion, if you're looking for a light-duty roof rack, this could be a good solution for you. It's relatively inexpensive. I think I mentioned before it cost about $300. I think about $40 of that was shipping, so roughly $250. It looks great, and it's completely reversible because you can just
put the old crossbars back in there. The main weakness of the factory rail system is the plastic front and rear mounts. These have printed on them maximum load 150 pounds. So if you're looking to add a rooftop tent or other heavy items on the rack, you'll need to use a rack with more robust mounting points. There are a lot of videos on YouTube that show these kind of racks. The difference is going to be you're going to be mounting that straight to where the factory mounts would have been, but you're going to use better hardware and you're going to have more strength there. Overall, I'm really happy with this build. It is a great upgrade over the factory crossbars. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that you've learned something and that maybe I've saved you a little bit of time trying to figure out how to do this on your own. Thank you.